Senator Rice.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I rise to speak in opposition to the Carbon Farming Initiative Amendment Bill 2014. I'm standing here tonight speaking on behalf of the majority of Australians who want serious, powerful, urgent action on climate change. Australia has been a leader in acting on climate change, and we have rapidly moved to the bottom of the pack. We are facing serious problems. The world is going to be a different place if the climate change that's currently foreshadowed occurs. Currently, we're on track for 4 degrees of warming and more. The extreme weather events that that's going to result in are going to have huge implications for Australia and the world. The rising sea levels, massive implications for billions of people around the world, and from people in Australia, the people like where my mother still lives in Altona, whose house just won't exist if we have sea level rise of 1 metre. The loss of species that are going to occur because of that amount of warming. The impact on our food supplies. I don't think people who are not serious about taking action on climate change, they can't have understood what the implications are. The implications of our wheat-growing areas in Australia no longer being able to grow wheat. When the climate of Dubbo, for example, becomes the climate of the central deserts, where under 4 degrees of warming it will be not possible to grow food crops in the tropics. And the impact that's going to have on the world, the impact it's going to have on refugee movements, the impact it's going to have on billions of people. Our water supplies, the impact of increasing droughts, the loss of lives due to the increasing, more intense bushfires spreading over a longer period of time, affecting more people more widely. We saw hundreds of people die in the heat wave that preceded the 2009 Black Saturday bushfires in Melbourne. And then we saw the over 100 people die in the bushfires themselves. This becomes the new norm. I'm here speaking on behalf of people who understand this reality, particularly young people, particularly people who understand the science and have said, yeah, this is a very, very scary situation that we're looking at, but realise that they can take action and they can do, and that we can act to change these things. Restoring a safe climate for us all, for humans and for all the species we share this planet with, is something that we can do. And we know that it's possible, but we have to take serious, important action. The very, very sad thing is that Australia was on track to be doing that. We had the architecture set up. We had an emissions trading scheme. We had measures in place that were the beginning that were going to be able to be built upon, that to create the reduction in carbon emissions that we know are necessary for Australia to play its part and to be a world player in reducing our carbon emissions, heading towards the future of zero carbon emissions, so that we can be restoring a safe climate that is a safe place for humans and all the other species that we share this planet with to live in. The world is the only saving grace, and for the people, particularly the people from across Australia that I've spoken to, they are disturbed, they are distressed by the action and the backward steps that Australia is taking on climate. They look at what other countries are doing and they think, well, there is a saving grace that at least with Australia being a laggard, being completely left behind, at least other countries are taking action. They look at the actions that are being taken in the European Union. They're massive and they're very ambitious reduction targets. They look at the fact that the coal in China is about to reach its peak and is going to be declining. They look at the massive rollout of solar energy in India. But then they look back at Australia and they think, poor, poor Australia, we are being left behind. And they know that it's not just an environmental issue, it's a social issue and it's an economic issue. Because we know that all of the international agencies, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, They have done the reports. They have said that it makes more sense economically to be taking urgent action on climate change now rather than leaving it into the future. The government's Carbon Farming Initiative Amendment Bill and direct action is a fig leaf. We've heard already today from my colleagues how little it's going to impact on our carbon emissions. The Reputex report that says they estimate that it will achieve a 20 to 30% of the 5% cut in emissions by 2020. That's 1% in reduction in Australia's emissions. In fact, we were already well on to doing that with the emissions trading scheme and the price on carbon that was initiated, which has now been scrapped. We need meaningful action. We know that the direct action, as well as being ineffective, is going to be massively expensive. I hear from the government benches day after day how they say we're in a budget emergency, it's important to be so careful as to how we spend our money. And yet we have got $2.5 billion that is going to be spent to be achieving so little. And what's worse, it's $2.5 billion that's going to be spent that's going into the pockets of the big polluters to be doing something that they probably would have been doing anyway. In repealing the Clean Energy Future Package, we have dismantled infrastructure that's going to have to be reconstructed again in a very short time period because direct action is not going to work. And in doing this, there's going to be a significant cost to Australia in lost time, money, innovation and competitive advantage. We know that we need to be working towards an economy and a society that's powered by 100% renewable energy. This direct action is taking us backwards in that regard. We know that we need to be putting infrastructure together that's going to enable us to be phasing out of coal. And I know that the very sad thing is that I know when we finalise this debate, we're going to have the summing up done by a government that all they can say is that coal is good for humanity and quote and be making ridiculous quotes about the support for coal that Bob Brown once had in 1981. I expect that that's what we will hear from Senator Cormann in his summing up. It's just inane, and the people listening to it are going to know that it's inane. We know that in order to be taking real action on climate change, we need to be phasing out of coal, and we know that that's going to be in Australia's economic interest to do that. We need to be saying no to increasing coal exports through the Great Barrier Reef, saying no to unconventional gas, including coal seam gas, and to be saying yes to renewable energy. Our emissions trading scheme was an important and efficient and effective way of doing this, backed by the Clean Energy Finance Corporation and ARENA. And we know now, having just received the details of the bill that is coming up tonight, that the Clean Energy Finance Corporation and ARENA are set to be abandoned at any time after December, in 2 months' time. These critical parts of the infrastructure are there. The uncertainty that's being put in place is just going to be further devastation for any remnants of action on climate change that was being taken. The government is sticking its head in the sand, and my message to the government is direct action is not the climate action that Australians are looking for. We want decisive, effective and fast action. Direct action is a slogan, not a real policy, and it comes from a government whose only real priority is propping up its friends in the big end of town. And these friends of the government are people who are still misguidedly living in a parallel universe where supposedly burning fossil fuels can continue unabated. They are addicted to fossil fuels. And they're trying to drag the dirty, coal-fired industries of the 20th century with us into the 21st, instead of helping us transition to a clean energy future. Direct action is not a viable replacement, and is vastly inferior to the carbon pricing mechanism we had. We had a world-leading scheme to price pollution and to drive dangerous global warming emissions down. It's inevitable that pricing carbon pollution is going to become a permanent feature of the global economy. I mean, even Clive Palmer, with his zero price and emissions trading scheme, recognised that. He knows that around the world people know that an emissions trading scheme is the most effective way to be getting effective action. And so under this government, Australia is just totally out of step with international trends and efforts to address global warming. We're not just out of step, we are stepping backwards fast. It's a high-cost. Direct action is a high-cost, narrow, government-controlled scheme that's intended to replace the existing market-driven, economy-wide, lowest-cost method of reducing harmful greenhouse gas emissions. Because what this dodgy direct action scheme consists of are voluntary grants that are just going to allow the polluters to get their sticky fingers into taxpayers' pockets. And Mr Clive Palmer and his Palmer United Party senators, I think, is a good example. I think we now know why Clive Palmer has been interested in supporting the government on this, because it means that not only in supporting abolishing the carbon tax, he didn't have to pay his tax for his carbon emissions, but now he stands to potentially benefit from direct action. The other thing that really makes me sad about this is knowing that this is such an important policy in going backwards on the most serious issue that faces humanity today, is the secrecy and the haste that we are voting tonight on a bill that even the Palmer United senators didn't know their own party's amendments until this morning. This is not a way to do business. It's not a way to do government. It's not what the people that I'm representing want to see happen. They've got expectations that we are going to be considering important pieces of legislation like this seriously and with all due regard and due respect and paying proper attention to what all the implications mean. And yet we know that we are going to have sent Australia backwards on our journey towards acting on climate change by the time we rise tonight. A very important impact that, in fact, of this policy that has only just become evident this evening is the impact on our forests. The Carbon Farming Initiative, as it stands, had a prohibition on the clearing of native forests or the use of products that come from native forests being eligible under the Carbon Farming Initiatives. But we now learn that prohibition is no longer in this bill. And so we now know that there is the potential for the clearing of our native forests and the use of wood products that are harvested from those forests to be considered as eligible carbon farming initiatives. This is opening the door to be logging our native forests and to be burning the products from those forests in forest furnaces for so-called clean energy. This is at a time when we've got the native forest-based industries on their knees in Australia because they haven't got a product for their wood chips on the world market. At a time when the majority of Australians want to see protection of our native forests, it is going to be opening the door for logging of those native forests and getting further subsidies for doing that, and destroying our native forests to be producing and burning them in forest furnaces for energy. I think this is very indicative of how sad and how debased this debate has become, and how backward, how out of touch with what Australians want out of our policies here in this parliament. We know that we have got the majority of Australians who want to see serious action on climate change. Every poll shows that that's the case. We have the majority of Australians who want to see protection of our native forests. But what we are doing tonight, in the interest of serving the interests of environmental destruction, serving the interests of the biggest polluters, and paying them excessive amounts to do it. The Greens, as you know, are going to be standing up, and we are going to be doing our best to be bringing attention to how we are going backwards in this debate. And I'm proud to be here tonight as part of a party that is standing up for the environment, that is standing up for serious action on climate change, that is standing up and wanting to do something to be getting answers, to be getting protection, and for our future. I've got 2 children, and I hope to have grandchildren one day. And I want them to have a planet that's livable. I want them to have a planet that I know that they can be healthy and that they can have the same quality of life that I've had today. Under the prospect of dangerous climate change, I feel frightened for them, and I really don't think that unless we come to our senses and join other governments around the world in coming to our senses, it is a bleak future. The positive side of this, however, though, is that I know that there are things that can be taken, there are solutions. It is in our power as a parliament to be taking action that will really be setting us on a path of a positive future, setting us on a path of 100% renewable energy, creating jobs, supporting those renewable energy industries that are burgeoning across Australia and across the world. I know that we can be transitioning to a zero-carbon economy and that it will be cheaper for us to do that. But instead, tonight, we are going backwards, and I think that's a very, very sad place to be.